You have a son?" Sienna's voice cracked through the stillness of Damon's study, louder than she meant, but trembling with disbelief. She held the photograph like it burned her fingers, a boy no older than 5, his gray eyes mirroring Damon's so perfectly it made her stomach twist. The room seemed to shrink around her. The polished oak desk, the shelves of untouched books, the faint tick of the clock. All of it blurred into nothing against the image in her hand. Eli. The name scrawled on the back dug into her heart with brutal force. Her breath shuddered. "How long were you planning to hide him from me?" The door behind her opened. She didn't need to turn. She felt him. Damon's presence filled the space, tall, commanding, but suddenly stripped of the unshakable certainty he always carried. His footsteps halted when he saw what she held. "I should have told you." His voice was rough, almost a whisper. "But I didn't know how." Sienna's hands trembled. Betrayal and grief tangled in her chest. Every moment replayed. His sudden proposal. The nights he swore she was the only one. The way he held her when she doubted she belonged in his glittering world. All of it cracked under the weight of one truth. "You let me say yes," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "Yes to you. Yes to forever. Without telling me I wasn't the only part of your life." Her words hit him harder than any slap could have. Damon's jaw tightened, his eyes clouded with something between guilt and fear. For a moment, silence pressed between them, heavy as the storm pounding against the windows. Sienna turned slightly, her voice breaking as she seemed to speak beyond him, to anyone who might hear. "What would you do if the person you trusted most carried a secret that could shatter everything?" The question lingered, pulling the listener into her turmoil, daring them to answer. She looked back at Damon. "I thought you were different, but this—" She held up the photograph, her hand shaking. "This changes everything." He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, hands open, as though he were afraid she might vanish. "I wasn't hiding him because I was ashamed," he said, his voice steadier now. "I was afraid you'd walk away." Her chest rose sharply. "And you thought lying was safer than losing me?" No reply, only the sound of rain hammering harder against the glass. Sienna pressed the photograph to her chest, as if shielding her own heart. A child's innocent face looked back at her, searing her mind with questions she didn't want to ask but couldn't escape. Who was his mother? Why hadn't Damon told her? What else had he kept hidden? Her voice softened to a whisper, but it cut deep. "I don't know if I can forgive this." The moment held them both captive, her torn between love and betrayal, him standing in the wreckage of his silence. "What about you? Would you forgive a love built on half-truths, or would you walk away forever?" Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, have you ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted? And don't forget to subscribe to Rich Billionaires romance stories for more unforgettable love tales. The storm had rolled into Chicago without warning. By nightfall, the sidewalks glistened beneath flickering streetlights, and umbrellas tilted against the sharp gusts of rain. Sienna Morris pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, her arms aching from the stack of manuscripts she carried home from the publishing house. Deadlines didn't stop for weather, and she often found herself carrying her work into long nights. Her heels clicked quickly against the wet pavement as she hurried past the cafe on the corner, its windows glowing with golden light. She had almost cleared the awning when the collision happened. Her papers flew everywhere, white sheets splashing into puddles like startled birds. The impact made her stumble backward, her breath caught in surprise. She dropped to her knees, heart racing, fingers scrambling to rescue the soaked pages. "Let me help you." The voice was deep, steady, and unexpected. A large hand reached down, scooping up papers with a kind of calm efficiency that didn't match the chaos of the rain. Sienna looked up, strands of her damp hair falling into her eyes, and for a moment she froze. He wasn't a stranger to Chicago. Damon Hart's face had appeared on business magazines, his name whispered in boardrooms as a man whose investments reshaped entire industries. but in the magazines he was always described as cold, ruthless, untouchable. Now, kneeling beside her in the rain, his expression was nothing like that. His eyes softened when they met hers, and he smiled, unguarded, almost shy. "Sorry," she muttered, reaching for a page he had already collected. Their fingers brushed, sending a jolt through her. She tried to pull back quickly, but he gently handed her the sheet instead of holding on. "No, it's my fault," he said. His suit, though expensive, was streaked with raindrops, the sharp line of his jaw shadowed under the cafe's neon glow. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Sienna tucked the papers against her chest, standing awkwardly. She hated drawing attention, and now she felt exposed under his steady gaze. "Thank you," she said, ready to step past him and disappear into the anonymity of the city night. But Damon didn't move aside immediately. He tilted his head, studying her as if trying to place her. "You work at Brightleaf Publishing, don't you?" She blinked. "Yes. How do you know?" His lips curved faintly. "You edited one of my business profiles last year. I recognized your name on the cover page." She felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold drizzle. Most people never noticed her work. Editing was invisible by design. For him to remember suggested something she hadn't expected. He paid attention. Yes, I did," she admitted, her voice smaller than she wanted. "You were honest," Damon said, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Not flattering. You cut out lines others would have left in. I like that." She didn't know how to respond. Compliments made her wary, especially from men whose words carried too much weight. Yet the way he said it wasn't with the arrogance she had imagined a billionaire might have. It was simple, direct. Another gust of wind blew rain across the sidewalk. Damon glanced at the cafe door. "Let me get you out of the storm. Just coffee." "Nothing more." Sienna hesitated. She wasn't the type to follow strangers, and Damon's heart was hardly ordinary. But soaked through and shivering, she found herself nodding. "All right." Inside the cafe, warmth wrapped around them. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon filled the air. They took a small table near the window, the rain streaking glass behind them like silver lines. Damon ordered black coffee. Sienna chose tea. They spoke lightly at first, about books, about how she stumbled into publishing, about the way he read more than anyone might assume from his intimidating reputation. Her heart thudded at the unexpected honesty. She had prepared for arrogance, for clipped sentences, for the distance of someone used to power. Instead, he seemed to lean into the space between them, interested in every word she shared. Sienna's guard, always high, wavered that night. They laughed once, a small, genuine laugh when he admitted he had tried to write once and produced nothing but a stiff business letter disguised as fiction. She teased him, and he took it without defensiveness. By the time the rain eased and the streets glistened under moonlight, Sienna realized she didn't feel the usual weight of exhaustion. Something about Damon's presence, quiet but unwavering, left her unsettled in a way she didn't dislike. When they stepped outside, he walked her to the corner. Neither wanted to stretch the evening longer, yet neither wanted it to end. Their goodbye was brief, a polite nod, but the look in his eyes lingered with her long after she reached her apartment. Sienna lay awake later, staring at her ceiling, wondering why a man whose world seemed galaxies away from hers had felt so unexpectedly human, so unexpectedly warm. She didn't believe in chance encounters meaning anything more than inconvenience. But tonight had shifted something she couldn't name. Sometimes the most life-changing connections begin in ordinary, messy moments. Have you ever met someone by accident who changed your life? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe to Enrich Billionaires Romance Stories for more. It had been 3 weeks since the rainy night at the cafe. Sienna had pushed the memory aside, burying herself in deadlines, manuscripts, and the quiet hum of her small office at Brightleaf Publishing. She told herself it had been nothing more than coincidence, a stranger helping her in the storm, sharing coffee, and vanishing back into a life far removed from her own. But Damon Hart wasn't a man who vanished easily. Late on a Thursday afternoon, as the office buzzed with tired assistants, and the scent of ink and paper filled the hallways, Sienna heard a stir near the reception desk. She barely looked up from her red pen until a hush fell over the floor. The click of polished shoes followed. When she finally raised her eyes, he was there. Damon stood in the doorway of her office, tall and composed in a tailored navy suit, his presence as unsettling as it was magnetic. Conversations outside hushed, people craned their necks to catch a glimpse, but Damon's eyes fixed on only one person, her. "Miss Morris," he said, his deep voice steady, though his gaze carried an intensity that made her throat tighten. "May I have a moment?" The room felt smaller with him in it. Sienna set her pen down slowly, hiding the tremor in her hand. "Mr. Hart, what brings you here?" His lips curved faintly, but his tone was serious. "I came to see you." Colleagues exchanged knowing glances outside the glass wall, but Sienna ignored them, forcing herself to remain composed. She gestured stiffly to the chair across from her desk. "Please." Damon didn't sit. He moved closer instead, the air between them tightening. He studied her for a moment, as if weighing every word. Finally he said, "I want you to be more than my editor. I want you to be my partner, in life." The words landed like a thunderclap. Sienna blinked. Surely she'd misheard. Her mouth parted, but nothing came out. She searched his face, waiting for the smirk that might reveal he was joking, some kind of test or arrogant game. But Damon Hart didn't smirk. His expression was unwavering, his eyes clear and piercing. "I don't understand," she whispered. He leaned forward slightly, bracing his hands on her desk. "I've spent years surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. You didn't. You were honest. You looked me in the eye without fear. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Her chest tightened. She shook her head faintly. "Mr. Hart, this isn't Damon," he corrected softly. "When it's just us, call me Damon." Her pulse quickened at the intimacy in his tone. She sat back, folding her hands in her lap as if to steady herself. "Damon, what you're suggesting, it doesn't make sense. You barely know me." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know your honesty, your quiet strength. I know the way you see the world differently than everyone around me, and I know I don't want to waste time pretending I don't feel what I feel." The silence stretched, broken only by the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights above. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. No man had ever spoken to her like this, not with such clarity, not with such certainty. And yet, fear pressed in. Her parents' marriage had begun with promises like this, bold, unshakable declarations. She had watched those vows crumble into shouting matches and eventual silence. She had told herself she would never be so reckless, never let herself believe in forever. She wet her lips, her voice shaking. "Do you even hear yourself? People don't propose like this. Not in offices, not without knowing." She cut herself off, pressing her hands against her temples. "I can't. I don't want to become someone's project." Damon's expression softened, but his resolve didn't waver. "This isn't about saving you or shaping you. I'm asking because when I think about the future, you're in it. I don't care if it's unconventional. I don't care if it shocks people. I care about you." The sincerity in his tone nearly broke her. But fear gnawed at her. What if she said yes, and ended up like her mother, abandoned, trying to stitch her heart back together? What if his world of wealth and power chewed her up and spat her out? "You'll get bored," she murmured. "You'll realize I'm not like the others you're used to, and I'll be the fool who believed you." He moved closer, crouching so his eyes met hers directly. "Look at me." Reluctantly she did. His gaze was steady, stripped of the armor she'd seen in magazines, the cold mask of a billionaire. He was just a man, vulnerable, determined. "I'm not asking for a perfect answer tonight," Damon said quietly. "I'm asking you to take a chance, to believe that maybe not every story ends the way you fear." Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. The moment stretched, fragile as glass. Sienna wanted to say no, to push him away before he could hurt her. But beneath the fear, another feeling pulsed stronger. Longing. She longed for someone to see her, not as an editor, not as the girl who stayed behind to finish work, not as the child of divorced parents, but as a woman worth choosing. Damon was offering that, with all his wealth, with all his flaws, with all his terrifying sincerity. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Yes." Damon's eyes closed briefly, relief flooding his features. When he opened them again, they burned with something deeper. He reached for her hand, brushing his thumb over her knuckles, careful, reverent. "You won't regret it." Tears stung her eyes, but for the first time in years, hope broke through the fear. Love sometimes requires courage to step into the unknown. Sienna's decision wasn't about wealth, or status, or dazzling promises. It was about choosing to believe. In him, in herself, in the possibility of something more than fear. The first weeks after Sienna said yes, felt like stepping into another universe. Damon's life unfolded in a rhythm far removed from hers. She was used to crowded buses, corner diners, and the quiet hum of her tiny apartment above a laundromat. Now she woke in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline, where the city lights sparkled endlessly beneath her feet. The mornings began with breakfast served on silver trays. Fresh flowers appeared in vases she hadn't placed. When she opened her closet, one evening, she found rows of dresses in silk and velvet, shoes lined like art. Damon hadn't asked if she wanted them, he had simply arranged it, as if comfort was something he could purchase for her. At first she marveled at the newness of it all. The private jets, the weekend in Aspen where snow seemed untouched, the gala invitations embossed in gold, yet behind the glamour, unease crept in. She had grown up watching her mother stretch tips from waitressing to cover rent. She knew what it was to count every dollar. Now, stepping into Damon's world, she wasn't sure if she was a guest or if she truly belonged. Her discomfort came to a head one evening at a charity gala. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, gowns glittered, and diamonds sparkled against manicured skin. Sienna wore a simple black dress Damon had chosen for her. It fit perfectly, yet standing among women draped in jewels, she felt painfully ordinary. Whispers drifted past her as champagne flutes clinked. Who is she? Not one of us. She looks sweet, but she doesn't belong here. Sienna's cheeks burned. She tried to steady her smile, but inside shame coiled tight. When Damon excused himself to greet a donor, she slipped to the edge of the room, wishing she could vanish into the shadows. Her mind raced back to her father leaving, her mother crying at the kitchen table. She had promised herself never to step into spaces that made her feel less, and yet here she was, surrounded by wealth so sharp it cut into her confidence. When Damon returned, he found her standing alone, her arms crossed over her chest like armor. "You hate this," he observed softly. She shook her head quickly. "I'm fine." But he didn't believe her. His eyes narrowed, and his jaw tightened in quiet thought. Then he reached for her hand, pulling her gently into the center of the room, ignoring the whispers. His arm wrapped firmly around her waist as he whispered, "You're not invisible, Sienna. You're the only one I see." The ride home was silent at first. Sienna stared out the car window, watching the city blur by. Finally she spoke, her voice low. "You don't hear them the way I do. You've lived in this world your whole life. I never have. I'll always be the outsider." Damon shifted closer, his hand covering hers. His touch was steady, grounding. "You're not here because of them," he said firmly. "You're here because of me, and I don't want you to change a single thing to fit in. The world adjusts, not you." His certainty disarmed her. She turned, searching his face for a hint of performance, but found none. His eyes, the same ones that carried her trust and her doubts, held only conviction. When they reached the penthouse, Damon didn't let go of her hand. He led her inside, past the glittering view, into the quiet sanctuary of his room. There, away from the noise of the world, he kissed her. Slow, deliberate, as if reminding her that intimacy wasn't about chandeliers or expensive gowns. They fell into a rhythm that belonged only to them. Late-night takeout on the kitchen counter, reading manuscripts aloud until they laughed at the worst lines. Whispered words in the dark when he told her things no one else knew. His fear of becoming the kind of man his father was, his longing for something real in a life built on appearances. Sienna began to understand that Damon wasn't just showing her his world. He was inviting her into the hidden parts of himself, and in those quiet spaces, her fears slowly began to ease. True love accepts you as you are. Sienna realized that Damon didn't need her to dazzle in diamonds or glide through rooms with flawless grace. He needed her honesty, her laughter, her grounding presence in a world too quick to flatter and deceive. And though doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she belonged, not in his wealth, but in his heart. The evening was quiet in Damon's mansion, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls after a long day. Sienna had been waiting for him to return from a late meeting. To pass the time, she wandered into his study, a place she rarely entered. The shelves stretched high, filled with books she suspected were more decorative than read. Papers rested neatly across his desk, stacked with precision. As her eyes drifted, she noticed a leather-bound folder slightly ajar. Curiosity tugged at her. Damon was meticulous, he never left anything out of place. She hesitated, then gently slid the folder open. Inside, a single photograph stared back at her. A little boy with gray eyes so familiar they stole the air from her lungs. His face was soft, innocent, framed by dark curls. Written across the back of the photograph in a firm hand were the words, Enili, age 5. Sienna's grip tightened around the picture as her pulse roared in her ears. The resemblance was undeniable. Those were Damon's eyes. That was Damon's son. Her throat constricted. The man she had said yes to, the man who whispered his fears to her at night, had hidden a truth so immense, it cracked the foundation of everything they had built. The door opened behind her, pulling her from the spiral of questions flooding her mind. Damon stepped inside, loosening his tie as he set his phone on the desk. His stride faltered when he saw her. His eyes flicked to the photograph in her hand, and for the first time since she had met him, his confidence broke. Sienna turned to face him, her eyes blazing with hurt. "Who is he?" Her voice trembled, though she fought to keep it steady. "Why didn't you tell me?" Damon's jaw clenched. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, his hands pressed against the desk as if steadying himself. "You let me walk into your life, into your world, and you never thought to mention you had a son?" Her voice cracked, the weight of betrayal lacing every syllable. Finally his shoulders slumped, the facade slipping away. His voice came low, heavy with guilt. "His name is Eli. He's mine." Sienna's chest tightened, her breath sharp and unsteady. "How long have you been hiding him from me?" "I wasn't hiding him because I was ashamed," Damon said quietly. His eyes searched hers, pleading. "I was afraid that if you knew you'd walk away before we even had a chance. I didn't know how to tell you without losing you." Her fingers shook as she lowered the photo, but her gaze never left his. "You already lost me the moment you chose silence over honesty." The words hung in the air, slicing through the fragile thread between them. Damon looked down, guilt carved into his features, as though he finally understood the depth of what his secrecy had cost. Secrets destroy trust faster than mistakes. Sienna could have accepted Damon's past. She could have learned to embrace the existence of his child, to build something real with truth as their foundation. But what cut deepest was not the boy, it was the silence, the choice to keep her in the dark. Love, she realized, didn't crumble because of flaws, it crumbled because of lies. What would you do if you found out your partner had a secret this big? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Which Billionaires Romance Stories for more captivating tales of love, betrayal, and second chances. The air in Damon's study grew heavy, charged with a tension that neither could escape. Sienna clutched the photograph of Eli, like it might anchor her in the storm of emotions rising inside her. Her voice cracked the silence first, sharp and wounded. You let me fall in love with you, Damon. You let me dream about a life with you. And all this time, you kept this from me? A child isn't something you forget to mention. Her words echoed, slicing through the room. Damon's jaw tightened, but he didn't move closer. His eyes stayed on her, dark and conflicted. I didn't forget, he said finally, his tone steady but quiet. I made a choice. Sienna's breath caught, fury igniting in her chest. A choice to lie. A choice to protect what I was afraid of losing. Damon countered, his voice rising now, matching the storm in hers. You don't understand. Then make me understand. She cut in, her voice trembling as tears blurred her vision. Because right now, all I see is a man who wasn't honest with me. And if you couldn't trust me with this, what else are you hiding? For a long moment, Damon stood silent, his hands braced against the desk. His breathing was unsteady. The calm mask he usually wore shattered. Finally, he looked up, his eyes raw. Years ago, before I ever met you, I was in a relationship with someone I thought I could trust. She wanted the life my money could give her, but nothing more. When things ended, she left without telling me she was pregnant. I didn't even know Eli existed until 2 years ago. By then, he already thought of another man as his father. Sienna's heart clenched at the weight of his confession, but she forced herself not to soften too quickly. Her hands shook as she placed the photo on the desk between them. So you've known about him for 2 years, and you've been keeping it from me for months. Why? Damon's gaze dropped to the photograph. His voice dropped too, almost breaking. Because I was afraid. Every time I looked at you, I thought of what this would mean. Would you think I was irresponsible, weak? Would you leave before we even had a chance to build something real? His admission was raw, but it didn't soothe her anger. Sienna shook her head, her voice shaking. You don't get to decide what I can handle. You don't get to take away my choice by hiding the truth. You thought you were protecting me, but you were protecting yourself. Sienna turned away, her arms hugging her body tightly as if to hold herself together. Betrayal pulsed through her veins, but beneath it, compassion stirred. She thought of the boy in the photograph, of the loneliness in Damon's voice when he spoke of being kept from his son. It hurt to imagine a man like him, so powerful in the world, powerless in something so personal. But that didn't erase the pain of his silence. I don't know how to reconcile this, she whispered, her back still to him. Part of me aches for you, for everything you've gone through, and part of me feels like a fool for ever believing I was the person you trusted most. Her words broke something in him. Damon stepped closer, careful, almost hesitant. You are the person I trust most, Sienna. That's why this terrified me. I've lost before. I couldn't risk losing you too. She turned back to him, her eyes red with tears. You already did, she said softly. Maybe not forever, but tonight you lost the one thing you needed most from me. My trust. Love without honesty cannot survive. In that moment, Sienna realized the truth wasn't just about Damon's hidden child. It was about the foundation of their relationship. Secrets didn't simply wound, they hollowed out the ground beneath you until even love couldn't hold steady. Damon's eyes held regret, but regret couldn't erase the fracture. Sienna knew that no matter how deep their connection, honesty was the lifeline love demanded. Without it, no amount of wealth, no grand gestures, no whispered promises could save them. The night stretched endlessly after the confrontation. Sienna's chest felt hollow, her mind clouded with hurt and confusion. She packed a small overnight bag in silence, her hands shaking as she folded clothes. Damon didn't stop her. He stood in the doorway, his face shadowed with regret, but he said nothing. The sound of the zipper closing was louder than words. She walked past him, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step pulling her further from the life she had begun to imagine. Outside, the city greeted her with cold air and flickering streetlights. She wandered aimlessly through familiar streets, clutching her bag close to her chest. Every corner of Chicago seemed sharper tonight. The sirens in the distance, the chatter of late-night crowds, the neon signs buzzing above diners. But none of it filled the ache pressing against her ribs. She thought of Damon's eyes, the way his voice broke when he admitted his fear. Part of her longed to run back, to forgive. But another part reminded her that trust, once broken, was not so easily mended. By morning, Sienna found herself outside a small diner on the south side, the one where her mother worked for years after her father left. The scent of coffee and frying bacon drifted out the door, grounding her in something familiar. She hadn't planned to come here, but her feet had carried her where her heart needed to be. Inside, her mother, Clara, was wiping down a table. Lines of age and resilience marked her face, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw her daughter. "Sienna, what are you doing here at this hour?" Sienna slid into a booth, her throat tight. "I didn't know where else to go." Clara sat across from her, concern etched into every feature. "Tell me what happened." Tears spilled before Sienna could hold them back. She explained everything: Damon's proposal, the life he introduced her to, and the photograph that shattered it all. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I should." Her mother reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "Sienna, love isn't about perfect people. Your father and I failed because we expected perfection from each other. But trust is different. It's not about never making mistakes, it's about choosing to fight for each other when mistakes happen." Sienna looked down, her voice soft. "But what if I fight, and he doesn't?" Clara squeezed her hand, her eyes steady. "Then you'll know you gave courage instead of fear. And courage is what heals us, even if the other person isn't ready to meet us there." Her mother's words settled in her heart, not as an answer, but as a light in the fog. Later that day, Sienna walked alone by the lakefront, the wind sharp against her cheeks. She replayed her mother's words, weighing them against her own doubts. Trust, she realized, wasn't about expecting Damon to never hurt her. It was about deciding whether his love, flawed, imperfect, but real, was worth the risk. She thought of the way he looked at her in crowded rooms, the way he steadied her when she doubted herself, the nights when he shared fears no one else knew. But she also thought of the silence, the photograph, the crack it left in her heart. Trust wasn't perfect. It was a choice, and choices always carried risk. As she stood at the water's edge, the city behind her and the endless horizon ahead, she understood that fear would only keep her frozen. If she wanted healing, she would have to choose courage. Courage over fear leads to healing. Sienna's journey that night wasn't about deciding Damon's fate. It was about deciding her own. She could let fear dictate her future, closing herself off, or she could step forward with courage, knowing healing begins with a choice. Her path with Damon remained uncertain, but her path with herself had grown clearer. For the first time since finding that photograph, she felt the faint spark of strength returning. The park was quiet that afternoon, touched with the warmth of late spring. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the playground, but the spot Damon chose was tucked under a grove of trees, where the grass grew thick and green. Sienna arrived with her heart pounding, unsure if she was ready for this step. Damon was already there, standing near a bench. Beside him was a small boy, hiding half behind his father's leg, his wide eyes cautious. Sienna's gaze locked on those eyes. The same, gray she had stared at in the photograph, the same ones that had brought her world crashing down. Only now they weren't part of a secret. They were staring back at her in curiosity. Eli, Damon said gently, crouching down to his son's level. This is Sienna. She's my friend. His pause was deliberate, his tone soft. Sienna's throat tightened, but she managed a small smile. She knelt, careful not to rush. From her bag, she pulled out a children's book, its cover bright and inviting. Hi, Eli. I brought something I thought you might like. The boy peeked out more fully, his little hands fidgeting at his sides. After a long moment, he stepped closer, curiosity overcoming shyness. He pointed at the book. What's it about? It's about a little fox who gets lost in the woods and finds his way home, Sienna explained, her voice warm, patient. Would you like me to read it with you? Eli's lips curved into the faintest smile. He nodded. Slowly he sat down beside her on the bench, his small frame leaning just close enough for comfort. As she began reading, his eyes lit up, following every word. For the first time since discovering the photograph, Sienna felt something shift. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about a child, innocent, open, deserving of love. From a short distance, Damon stood with his hands in his pockets, his posture stiff but his expression unguarded. His eyes followed every movement, every word, every flicker of Eli's smile as Sienna read. He didn't interrupt. He didn't step closer. He simply watched, hope flickering across his face in ways he couldn't conceal. For months he had worried that the truth about Eli would tear Sienna away. Now, watching her lean in to show Eli the pictures, hearing his son's soft giggles at the fox's adventures, Damon felt a weight lift from his chest. When Sienna glanced up briefly, her eyes met his. For a fleeting second, their gazes locked. She saw gratitude there, raw, unspoken, and fragile. He was giving her the space to decide, to choose if she wanted to embrace this part of his world. And in his silence, she understood something important. He wasn't trying to control this moment. He wasn't forcing anything. He was simply hoping. Love must embrace the whole story, including children. As the book closed and Eli leaned against her shoulder with the easy trust only children carried, Sienna realized that Damon's life was not just about penthouses and galas. It was about this little boy, too. To love Damon fully would mean loving Eli, accepting that the story they were building together wasn't just theirs, it was his as well. True love wasn't about erasing the past or ignoring the complications. It was about widening the circle of the heart to hold all of it, even the unexpected parts. Would you give someone a second chance if they opened their life fully to you? Share your thoughts and subscribe to Rich Billionaires romance stories. And for more, the weeks that followed their first meeting in the park began to reshape Sienna's days. What had once been a quiet, predictable life of manuscripts and deadlines now pulsed with unexpected routines that weren't hers alone. Mornings sometimes began with Damon knocking lightly on her apartment door, Eli in tow, holding a small soccer ball under his arm. "Breakfast?" Damon would ask with a hint of a smile, and Sienna would find herself brewing extra coffee, while Eli rummaged through her kitchen drawers for cereal bowls. Afternoons shifted into visits at Damon's penthouse. Instead of stiff, formal dinners like the ones she once attended by his side at galas, the dining table now hosted messy plates of pasta and Eli's endless chatter about school projects and his favorite superheroes. Sienna learned quickly that Eli hated peas, loved soccer, and had a laugh that filled every corner of the room. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes Eli pulled away, shy and uncertain of her place in his world. Sometimes Sienna felt a flicker of doubt, wondering if she was intruding on a bond that should belong only to Damon and his son. But with each day, the rhythm of their lives began to settle into something new, something real. One evening, Damon surprised Sienna by suggesting they all cook together. The kitchen filled with laughter as Eli insisted on stirring the sauce, splattering half of it across his shirt. Damon, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, grabbed a dish towel and chased his son around the counter until Eli collapsed into giggles. Later, after dinner, Board games sprawled across the living room table. Sienna sat cross-legged on the floor, her hair tumbling around her shoulders as she bent forward to help Eli count spaces on the board. Damon sat opposite them, watching with quiet amusement as Eli grinned in triumph at every small victory. It was in these ordinary moments, the laughter, the mess, the clatter of dice, that Sienna felt her walls lowering. She had once imagined Damon's world as cold and untouchable. But here, she saw something different. A man who burned toast while trying to make breakfast, who let his son climb onto his shoulders to see the world higher, who looked at her across the table not with dominance, but with warmth. And she realized she wasn't out of place here. She was becoming part of this family, step by step. As days turned into weeks, Sienna and Damon found their connection deepening beyond the presence of Eli. The nights they spent alone became softer, filled not with grand declarations, but with quiet talks on the balcony. The city stretched out before them. One evening as Eli slept, Damon and Sienna sat side by side, their hands entwined. Damon spoke of his fears more openly now, how he worried about being a father, about making mistakes he couldn't undo. Sienna listened, her thumb brushing over his knuckles, offering not judgment but comfort. When she leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, Damon pressed a kiss to her hair and whispered, "You make me believe I can do this. Not just business, not just fatherhood, but life. With you." Intimacy no longer felt like something performed under the pressure of his wealth or the shadow of secrets. It grew in quiet ways, in the way he reached for her hand at dinner, in the way she tucked a blanket around him when he worked late, in the way they both leaned closer during silence, because being near each other felt enough. Real intimacy comes in ordinary moments. Sienna understood now that love wasn't built on private jets or dazzling gowns. It wasn't even built on Damon's powerful words. It was built on laughter over spilled sauce, whispered fears shared in the dark, and the simple joy of belonging. For the first time since she said yes to Damon, she wasn't afraid of his world. She wasn't even afraid of her own doubts, because in the ordinariness, she found the extraordinary truth. Intimacy was not about luxury, but about trust, presence, and the courage to share the smallest parts of themselves. The headlines exploded overnight. Billionaire Damon Hart hides secret son. Who is the woman at his side? Love story or cover-up? Sienna woke to flashing cameras outside her apartment, reporters shouting questions as she tried to leave for work. Microphones shoved toward her, their voices relentless. "Miss Morris, did you know Damon had a child before you said yes? Are you raising another woman's son as your own? Is this relationship real or a publicity stunt?" She froze under the barrage, her chest tightening as strangers dissected the most intimate parts of her life. Damon's world, once private, had been torn wide open, and now, so had hers. That evening, the story plastered across every screen left no space for doubt. The world knew about Eli, and the world was hungry to judge. The whispers were worse than the headlines. At charity luncheons, Sienna felt eyes trail over her, measuring, mocking. Women smiled politely but whispered once she passed. Men raised brows in judgment, their smirks cruel. "She's naive. She must have known. She's clinging to him for the money." Every word pierced deeper than she wanted to admit. Even in the grocery store, she overheard strangers debating her choices as though she were a character in a scandal, not a woman living through it. At first, she tried to endure in silence, but humiliation has a way of growing heavier with every sideways glance. One night, after another headline mocked her as Damon's blind companion, Sienna broke down, tears soaking her pillow. When Damon found her, he pulled her close. "They don't know you. Don't let their voices matter more than mine." But Sienna's voice cracked as she whispered, "Maybe I don't belong in this world after all." The final straw came at a high-profile charity gala. Photographers swarmed as Damon and Sienna entered, their flashes cruel and blinding. The whispers followed them inside, louder than the music. Sienna felt the weight of ridicule pressing against her skin, but when she looked at Damon's face, calm, composed, his hand steady around hers, she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. Halfway through the event, as murmurs grew, she surprised everyone by stepping toward the stage. Gasps echoed through the room as she took the microphone. Her hands trembled, but her voice rose clear, cutting through the noise. You've all read the stories. You've whispered your judgments. And maybe it's easier to believe a headline than to believe in love. But let me tell you the truth. The room fell silent. Every eye locked on her. Damon, watching from below, froze in disbelief. Love isn't about perfection, Sienna continued, her voice gaining strength. It isn't about hiding flaws or living in fear of what people will say. Love is about choosing each other, especially when it's hard. Damon is not perfect, neither am I. But together, we are stronger than your doubt, your gossip, or your headlines. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. Not everyone clapped, but enough did that Sienna felt her knees steady beneath her. Damon met her at the bottom of the steps, his eyes burning with pride. He pulled her close, uncaring of the cameras flashing around them. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered. "Yes, I did," she replied, her voice firm but tender. "Because they needed to know that I chose you. Not your money, not your image, you." He pressed his forehead against hers, his voice breaking. "You have no idea how much I love you." In that moment, Sienna realized something powerful. It wasn't Damon's wealth or protection that made her strong. It was her own courage, the strength to stand beside him even when the world wanted her to fall. Love's strength is proven when the world doubts you. Sienna understood that true love wasn't measured in quiet, easy moments. It was measured in storms, in ridicule, in the choice to stand tall when others wanted you to crumble. Together, she and Damon had faced the world's judgment, and together they had refused to bow. Have you ever had to stand up for someone you loved when everyone else judged? Comment below and don't forget to hit subscribe to Ninja Rich Billionaires romance stories and for more. The night of the anniversary arrived quietly, without the flashing cameras or glittering galas that had once defined Damon's world. He had chosen something different this time. The cafe where they first met. Its windows glowed softly against the Chicago evening, the scent of fresh coffee drifting into the air. Sienna stepped inside, her heart beating with a strange mix of calm and anticipation. Damon was waiting at a corner table, dressed simply in a dark sweater, no tie, no grand display. Only him. When she sat down, he reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing gently against her skin. His eyes, steady and vulnerable, met hers. "I asked you to marry me once before," he began, his voice low, raw with emotion, "but I asked in fear. I asked because I thought if I didn't hold on tightly, I'd lose you. Tonight, I ask again, not in fear, but in truth." He rose, reaching into his pocket. The cafe hushed as if even the air wanted to witness the moment. He knelt, not as the billionaire the world knew, but as a man stripped of pride, offering everything. "This time, Sienna, I don't ask you because I'm afraid of losing you. I ask because I cannot imagine living without your love. For me, and for Eli, will you marry me?" Tears welled in Sienna's eyes as the memories of their journey washed over her. The collision in the rain, the proposal that left her shaken, the photograph that broke her heart, the laughter with Eli that stitched it back together, and the moment she stood before the world and chose him, not because it was easy, but because it was hers to choose. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Yes." This time, the word carried no hesitation, no shadow of fear. It was a promise she gave with full clarity, knowing every flaw, every mistake, and every truth Damon carried. She chose him, not as the man he appeared to be in headlines, but as the man who had shown her his heart in all its complexity. Damon's breath caught. Relief, joy, and love filled his eyes as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The cafe, small and ordinary, became the most sacred place in the world. Damon rose to his feet, pulling her into his arms. Their kiss was slow, deep, unhurried, not the desperate kiss of fear or secrecy, but the steady seal of a promise. The cafe patrons clapped softly, but the world around them disappeared. When they pulled apart, Damon whispered against her lips, "We're not starting over, Sienna. We're starting new, with honesty, with us, with Eli." Later that night, back at the penthouse, Eli came bounding into the room in his pajamas, his eyes lighting up when Damon scooped him into his arms. "Guess what?" Damon said, his voice filled with warmth. Sienna said yes. Eli's grin widened as he turned to her. Without hesitation, he wrapped his small arms around her waist. "Does that mean you'll be my mom now?" Tears spilled freely as Sienna knelt, hugging him tightly. "It means I'll always be here for you," she whispered. In that moment, the three of them stood together, not a perfect family, but a real one. Bound not by flawless stories, but by truth, love, and choice. True love survives flaws, grows stronger through truth. Sienna realized that love had never been about the absence of mistakes. It had been about facing them, choosing to fight for connection, and letting honesty rebuild what secrets had tried to destroy. With Damon and Eli, she wasn't stepping into a fairy tale. She was stepping into reality, and that reality, messy and beautiful, was worth everything. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes love is worth fighting for. Subscribe to Rich Billionaires romance stories patterns for more unforgettable love tales.